Hello, Lenawee County. My name is Bryan Vish, and here's what's happening this week in Lenawee.
Accurate, dependable, and late-breaking. This is local and state news on WLEN, Lenawee's local news station.
Police in the Bahamas have released Bryan Hooker without charges in connection to the disappearance of his wife, Lynette Hooker. Authorities had detained and questioned Bryan for several days, but were required to either charge or release him by a legal deadline Monday evening. No charges were filed, and he was released shortly after that cutoff. Investigators say that the case remains active, and Bryan Hooker could still face charges if new evidence emerges. Lynette has not been found, and search efforts continue as officials work to determine what happened. Bryan Hooker says he will be staying in the Bahamas through the end of his visa to personally search for his missing wife. Hooker spoke to ABC News while in the Bahamas.
My only focus is to go back to the boat and then hire or beg people to help me go find some areas to search.
Is that what's next for you?
That's what's next for me until my visa runs out.
So you plan on staying in the Bahamas?
Yes, this is where my wife is.
Bryan Hooker, once again now released, became emotional while speaking, describing the situation as overwhelming.
It was hell. It was a different chapter of hell and a giant hell that I'm in.
You're still in it?
Yes, I don't have a wife. She belongs with me.
That was Bryan Hooker speaking with ABC News. Tecumseh Public Schools has approved 2 technology and safety purchases following action at its April 13th board meeting. The district will move forward with the purchase of 100 tablets and 300 Chromebooks with costs not to exceed $100,000. Board members also approved replacing the middle school's fire alarm system, which came in at approximately $222,274 after officials said parts for the current system are no longer available. Both items appeared on the meeting agenda as action items and were approved as presented. District officials say the upgrades are part of ongoing efforts to maintain equipment and ensure reliable technology and safety systems for students and staff. 6 Adrian Public Schools students were recognized this past Monday as the latest recipients of the district's Outstanding Citizen Awards. During the APS Board of Education's regular meeting, Superintendent Nate Parker presented the awards, which recognize students who demonstrate qualities of Maple Pride: productivity, respect, integrity, determination, and excellence. The awarded students are Jack Knowles from Alexander Elementary, Kalani Tyndall from Lincoln Elementary, Ariana Owens from Mickner Elementary, Elias Collins from Prairie Elementary, Angelique Baricio from Springbrook Middle School, and Adam Parker from Adrian High School. Multiple agencies carried out a coordinated narcotics operation in Adrian late last week. The Region of Irish Hills Narcotics Office, or RHINO, says detectives executed 2 search warrants Friday, April 10th, in the 500 to 600 block of East Maumee Street. Investigators report seizing multiple drugs in amounts consistent with distribution, along with scales, packaging materials, cash, and 2 firearms. One weapon was a so-called ghost gun with an obliterated serial number and modified to fire automatically. Detectives are working with the Lenawee County Prosecutor's Office on potential felony charges. The investigation remains ongoing. A new round of federal funding could impact rural communities across Michigan, including Lenawee County. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says it invested $889 million statewide over the past year through its rural development programs. The funding targets infrastructure, housing, and economic development. The largest share, about $274 million, is aimed at affordable housing, while community projects and agribusiness also receive support. Local governments, nonprofits, and developers must apply to access the funds. Similar grants have already helped townships upgrade emergency communication systems, a model that could extend to Lenawee if local entities pursue the funding.
The Michigan Arrows of the Continental Football League may be calling Adrian home in the next week or so. The general manager and head coach, Steve Kaiser, was in the Maple City earlier this week looking at possible locations for their home games this spring, O'Laughlin Stadium or Docking Stadium. The Super Bowl winning assistant coach with the 1985 Chicago Bears was on 96.5 The Cave's Inside the Cave show Tuesday morning and talked about why he was looking at Adrian as a possible location. There's a local tie with longtime athletic director and coach at Adrian College, Mike Duffy.
We were looking at some opportunities, and we've been going back and forth bidding with several schools, accepting bids and trying to negotiate things. And Mikey suggested, why not come here just to take a look, because we have two colleges right here and they have some facilities. So we did that. We're looking at a couple of other places too, but we're going to make our mind up, I think, next week. So, but this is a great town. I think that the setting would be just perfect because it's big enough, but yet not won't swamp you, and and it's small enough where everything's kind of concise, and you get to meet a lot of people, and it's kind of be a fun atmosphere.
The Continental Football League consists of 8 teams, 4 northern teams, and 4 in Texas. They'll play their games beginning in late May. Tune in for the latest on the Michigan Arrows decision on location right here on 96.5 The Cave.
A legal fight now before the Michigan Court of Appeals could reshape who controls renewable energy projects across Michigan. At issue is Public Act 233 of 2023, which allows developers to bypass local governments and go directly to the Michigan Public Service Commission. Supporters say that's necessary to build out the grid efficiently. Opponents argue the state went too far, limiting local control over land use. The case centers on one question, where the balance should be between state energy needs and a community's right to decide what gets built. The debate played out in court with attorneys arguing over whether the state is simply enforcing the law or going beyond it. Local governments say the commission changed key definitions and weakened their role in the process. The state argues those interpretations are necessary to keep projects from being blocked.
This goes way beyond an interpretive statement. This changes definitions. We've talked about the ALU and the CREO, but there are others as well. And I don't think
it could still be an interpretive statement. They just went too far, right?
Well, yes, I agree, but it doesn't. The interpretive statement, in fact, the whole purpose of the statute, and this is right in the statute, right, is that they only have the powers and duties granted to them by the legislature and nothing more. And so if you were promulgating an order for application filing instructions and procedures, you would look at this order and say, this goes way beyond that.
State attorneys pushed back, arguing the commission is not rewriting the law, but applying it in a way that actually works. They say without those interpretations, local governments could delay or deny projects indefinitely, undermining the intent of Public Act 233.
For that point, Your Honor, I would note that under Section 222 of the Act, the default is that a developer can come to the Michigan Public Service Commission to seek a certificate. It's only when the affected local units affirmatively notify the developer that they each have a compatible renewable energy ordinance that the citing must first, at least initially, occur at the local level. Now, we know that the plain language of the Act is the best evidence we have for legislative intent, and I would submit that there can be no reading of Public Act 233 that would have intended to give a veto right to local units of government to indefinitely preclude a project from going before the Michigan Public Service Commission. But that is what the interpretation that the appellants are seeking would allow.
In our briefing, we gave the court examples. In Fremont Township, for over a year, the township refused to hold the required meeting. The developer had to go to court. It took a year and a half just to get the first required meeting. Those are the guardrails that Mr. Homier is saying are just fine. Those are the guardrails. No, that's the mischief that that's the mischief that the act was designed to remedy. And that's the mischief in their proffered interpretation that the townships are attempting to now inject back in.
At the heart of the case is how far that authority goes. Local leaders argue they still have the right to decide where projects are built, not just how they operate. The state maintains that allowing additional local restrictions would effectively restore veto power, undermining the law's purpose. Ultimately, judges are being asked to decide whether the commission is properly interpreting the law or rewriting it in a way that shifts control away from local communities.
So I want to go back, Judge Kelly, to your question, because I think that appellees were conflating two different things. One is the location of the meeting, right? The statute is unambiguous. It says you shall hold a public meeting in each affected local unit of government. The order, on the other hand, now says it'll be reviewed on a case-by-case basis and a good faith effort to hold the meeting as close as feasible. If that's not a rewrite of the legislative pronouncement, I don't know what is.
Lenawee County Commissioner Kevin Martis says the issue isn't just renewable energy itself, but how the state is implementing the law. He argues the current appeal is focused on whether regulators went beyond what lawmakers intended and whether that shift is limiting how local governments can respond to projects already being proposed across the county.
This legal appeal today that was in front of the appellate panel in Detroit is not challenging the legality of Public Act 233. Rather, it's challenging an order issued by the Michigan Public Service Commission implementing Public Act 233. And the argument, and our argument is that that order far exceeds the statutory authority given the Public Service Commission to implement a statute like this. In essence, they have rewritten the statute because the way the legislator left it was not beneficial enough for the renewable energy developers. And so they've redefined terms and they've rewritten the legislation. And I think anybody watching the video of the proceedings today will see that the judges were not sympathetic with what the Public Service Commission has done at all. The best outcome, I think, is exactly what Foster Swift asked for, which is that order be rescinded, that it be vacated. And that would strengthen the township's positions who are currently dealing with these projects. Foster Swift represents a number of townships in Lenawee County. Almost every township in my district, District 7, is represented by Foster Swift, and a number of other ones in the county are as well. They're an outstanding law firm, and no, I don't have shares of their stock, but they've done really good work on this, and we owe them a tremendous debt because without them, we wouldn't even be considering these arguments. I mean, 72 townships and 7 counties have joined resources to do this, including a number of townships in Lenawee County.
Martis says concerns aren't limited to one political perspective, pointing to widespread opposition at the local level when projects were previously put to voters. He argues the issue cuts across party lines, with communities reacting similarly regardless of political affiliation when large-scale developments are proposed in their area.
The scale and scope of the renewable energy projects being proposed just for Lenawee County is absolutely massive. And for instance, in Deerfield Township, where I serve as their zoning administrator, the solar project there is leased more than 2,000 acres, and the proposed project there is sited on literally some of the most productive farm ground in the state of Michigan. And so the fact that PA 233 restricts the ability of local communities to protect assets like prime farm ground is, of course, a big concern. Long term, of course, Lenawee County has had a number of these wind projects and now solar projects face the ballot box in township referenda prior to Public Act 233, and they were strongly opposed, much like data centers today. And now that the states come in and try to preempt this local input on this process, at least in some hybrid fashion like the law reads right now, it continues to be problematic. The voice of the local people doesn't matter, which leads one to wonder if data centers won't be the next project where the state looks to take away local control. We're seeing a heavy theme right now of state input on these kinds of issues, and I will say that in general, it's now having a bipartisan impact.
He says part of the concern is where these projects are being placed, especially on farmland. While some developers suggest dual use solutions like grazing livestock beneath solar panels, Martis questions whether those ideas realistically address the scale of land being converted.
I would say that the PA 233 does have some language in it suggesting that more of these solar projects should be encouraged on brownfield ground. Well, I think any siting consideration needs to try and site these projects in the point of least impact. Right now, the developers are pursuing farm ground because it's cheap and it's stripped and it's quick for them to go in. But the truth is there are much better places for these projects to go that don't have the really difficult choice between agriculture and power generation. Rooftops, brownfields, MDOT rights of way. There are many places that these solar projects in particular can go that don't have the adverse impact. And I will say that the developers quickly say, well, we can do agrivoltaics and we'll put sheep underneath the panels. Well, here's the problem. We're going to need about 500,000 acres of solar in the state of Michigan. And I don't know who's going to eat that many sheep.
Martis also points to growing energy demand, especially from large developments like data centers, which he says are driving the push for new generation. He argues the land required to support that demand through renewables alone highlights the scale of the challenge facing communities.
The data center in Saline is going to require 1.4 gigawatts of electricity. Now, there's enough existing generation now to carry that, Detroit Edison says. But there's another dozen of these things proposed. So at some point, new generation is going to need to be constructed, and under our new renewable energy laws, it's going to have to be primarily wind and solar. And in general, the developers are pushing solar. You would need at minimum 45 square miles of ground to power the Saline data center, and in truth, probably something more like 90 to 100 square miles, 3 entire townships to power one data center. That sense of scale is monstrous when you consider that one nuclear power plant on a brownfield in Detroit could easily power multiple data centers and only impact 1 square mile of ground.
Beyond land use, Martis says the issue also ties into how energy is produced and distributed in Michigan, pointing to the structure of how the state's utility system and how projects are incentivized under current regulations.
The knotty part of this question is the fact that we have a regulated utility environment in the state of Michigan, where the overwhelming majority of our electricity is generated by 2 monopoly utilities that are regulated by the Public Service Commission. And it's the shareholders, they're investor-owned utilities. It's in their best interest to control as much of the power generation in the state as possible so they can maximize shareholder value. In that construct, they're supposed to sell the electricity or the gas at cost. Their profit comes at a guaranteed rate just short of 11% per year on their capital expenditures on things like power plants. Well, guess what? Nothing makes them as much money as renewable energy power plants because you have to build an awful lot of them, and they typically only last 20 to 30 years. So every time they wear one out, they go back for a new rate hike and they get to build it again. Irrespective of how much the electricity costs from these projects, the real harm to the ratepayer is the regulated profits on those power plant expenditures. And because it's a percentage of the cost to construct these plants, they have every incentive to inflate the cost of those plants, something called the average Johnson effect, where their tendency is to gold plate these installations because the more you spend, the more they make, which is the exact opposite of how it works in a free market business, where overspending on capital projects diminishes your return. Here they're incentivized to make decisions that harm the ratepayers and benefit their shareholders. So you won't fix the renewable energy problem until you first fix that fundamental regulated utility market that we have here in the state of Michigan.
Martis says until those broader structural issues are addressed, conflicts over renewable energy siting and local control are likely to continue regardless of how this specific case is decided. A decision from the Michigan Court of Appeals could have wide implications, not just for developers, but for communities across the state. At stake now is how future renewable projects will move forward and who ultimately has the authority to shape them. The ruling will help define whether Public Act 233 strengthens statewide planning or limits local control, beyond what lawmakers intended. For now, the case remains under review, with judges weighing competing interpretations of the law and its limits.
Appreciate your arguments today, well argued on both sides. We appreciate you appearing here in court in person today, and the case is submitted.
Reporting in Adrian, I'm Bryan Vish for WLEN, Lenawee's local news station. And that'll wrap it up for us this week in Lenawee. I'm Bryan Vish for WLEN, Lenawee's local news station.
Count on WLEN, Lenawee's local news station, to keep you informed with accurate and dependable information 24 hours a day.